Kate Morrison wiped the sweat from her forehead as she moved through the training room. Her legs felt heavy and her eyes burned from exhaustion. She had been awake for more than 20 hours, leading drill after drill for the alien visitors who stood watching from the observation deck. The Velkari were tall reptilian creatures with scaled skin that shimmered green and brown under the ship's lights. They had long faces with sharp teeth and crests on their heads that moved up and down depending on their mood. Their eyes were cold and calculating, always judging, always measuring. Kate was the human liaison officer on the UES Horizon, a massive Earth ship that traveled between star systems. Her job was to show the Velkari how humans trained for combat and worked as a team. The Velkari were new members of the Galactic Council, and they wanted to see if humans were worth respecting. So far, they did not seem impressed. Kate could hear them clicking and hissing to each other in their language. She did not need a translator to know they were mocking her and her team. The Velkari were cold-blooded creatures who could go days without rest. To them, warm-blooded mammals like humans were weak and inferior. But Kate refused to give up. She pushed herself harder, running faster, demonstrating combat moves with precision despite her exhaustion. Her team followed her lead, trusting her completely. They had been through worse together, fighting in real battles across the galaxy. The leader of the Velkari observers was called War Priest Skarath. He was the largest of the group with a blood-red crest and scars across his scaled chest. He stood with his arms crossed, his reptilian face showing clear disapproval. Every few minutes he would lean toward another Velkari and say something that made them hiss with what sounded like laughter. Kate tried to ignore them. She focused on her breathing, on the movements of her body, on the faces of her team members who looked to her for guidance. They were tired too, but they kept going because she kept going. The training room was set up to look like a hostile planet. There were artificial rocks, low lighting, and sounds of explosions playing through speakers. Kate led her team through a series of combat scenarios, showing how humans adapted to different situations quickly. Commander Greg Palmer, her second in command, had asked her to take a break 3 hours ago. She had refused. The Velkari were watching, and she needed to prove that humans could match their endurance. As Kate demonstrated a close combat technique, her vision started to blur. The room seemed to tilt sideways. She blinked hard, trying to clear her head. Her heart was pounding too fast and her hands were shaking. She took a step forward and her knee buckled. Kate tried to catch herself, but her body would not respond. The floor rushed up to meet her, and then everything went dark. Kate collapsed onto the training mat, unconscious before she hit the ground. The human team members rushed toward her, but they were too far away. The medics were 3 decks below, responding to another situation. Kate's communication device had been damaged during an earlier drill, so she could not call for help. On the observation deck, War Priest Skarath let out a sound that was clearly contemptuous. He said something to the other Velkari, and they all hissed in agreement. To them, this proved everything they believed about humans. Weak, fragile, unable to endure. Skarath walked down from the observation deck and approached Kate's unconscious body. His crest was raised high, a sign of superiority among his people. He began speaking in the Velkari language, his words harsh and dismissive. But then something unexpected happened. 3 small shapes darted out from behind the observation deck. They were Velkari younglings, children barely old enough to walk on their own. In Velkari culture, young ones were brought to military exercises early to learn the ways of warriors. The 3 younglings were small, no bigger than human children, around 5 or 6 years old. Their scales were soft and pale, not yet hardened by age. Their crests were tiny, barely visible on their small heads. They ran across the training room floor with surprising speed. Before any of the adults could react, the 3 younglings positioned themselves around Kate's fallen body. They formed a triangle, each facing outward. Their small crests rose up as high as they could go. They opened their mouths, showing their needle-sharp baby teeth. Their eyes, which had been curious and playful moments before, were now fierce and protective. The younglings made a sound that no human had ever heard before. It was low and thrumming, coming from deep in their throats. It made the air vibrate with its intensity. War Priest Skarath stopped moving. His crest, which had been raised in arrogance, slowly lowered. His eyes went wide. He stood completely still, as if frozen. All the other adult Velkari had the same reaction. They stopped hissing. They stopped moving. They just stared at the 3 younglings standing guard over the fallen human. Commander Palmer burst into the training room with 2 medics. They had finally received the emergency call. Palmer stopped short when he saw the scene before him. 3 alien children stood protectively around his commanding officer. A dozen adult aliens stood motionless, staring at the children with what looked like shock or awe or fear. The air felt thick with tension. Palmer had been in many strange situations during his years in space, but this was something entirely new. He could see that the younglings were protecting Kate, but he did not understand why. He also did not understand why the adult Velkari were not moving to stop them. War Priest Skarath slowly lowered his body to the ground. He pressed his chest against the floor in what looked like a gesture of deep respect or submission. One by one, every other Velkari adult did the same. Palmer made a quick decision. He gestured for his medics to stay back. Something important was happening here. Something he did not fully understand. He needed to be careful not to make things worse. He slowly approached the younglings, keeping his body language non-threatening. He had learned a few words of the Velkari language during his time on the ship. His pronunciation was terrible, but he hoped they would understand his meaning. He spoke softly and clearly. "We are healers. We help her. You did good protecting her." The smallest youngling turned its head to look at him. Its eyes were ancient and knowing despite its young age. It studied Palmer for a long moment, as if deciding whether to trust him. Then slowly, the small youngling stepped to the side. The other 2 followed, creating an opening in their protective circle. Part 2. The human medics moved quickly but carefully toward Kate. They knelt beside her unconscious body and began their work. One medic checked her pulse while the other prepared a medical scanner. Their movements were efficient and practiced. The 3 Velkari younglings did not leave. They stayed close, watching everything the medics did with intense focus. Their small crests remained raised and their bodies stayed tense, ready to defend if needed. Commander Palmer watched in amazement as the medics worked. Kate was severely dehydrated and exhausted, but otherwise stable. They lifted her onto a medical stretcher and began moving her toward the exit. The younglings walked alongside the stretcher like tiny guards. Their eyes scanned the room constantly, looking for any threat to the human they were protecting. When one of the human team members stepped too close, the smallest youngling hissed softly in warning. Palmer followed behind, his mind racing with questions. What had triggered this behavior? Why were the adult Velkari still prostrated on the floor? What did this mean for human-Velkari relations? As they moved through the corridors toward the medical bay, other crew members stopped and stared. The sight of 3 alien children escorting a human on a stretcher was bizarre and touching at the same time. In the medical bay, the doctors took over Kate's care. They placed her on a bed and connected monitoring equipment. The younglings positioned themselves at the foot of the bed, still maintaining their protective watch. Dr. Lisa Hayes tried to shoo them away, but they would not budge. When she reached for the smallest one, it snapped its teeth in her direction. Not to bite, but as a clear warning, Palmer held up his hand. "Leave them. Something important is happening here." Dr. Hayes frowned but nodded. She had learned to trust Palmer's instincts over the years. If he said to leave the alien children alone, she would leave them alone. Palmer left the medical bay and headed toward the observation lounge. He needed answers, and he suspected War Priest Skarath could provide them. The Velkari leader had requested an urgent meeting. When Palmer entered the lounge, he found Skarath standing by the window, looking out at the stars. The War Priest's crest was lowered in what Palmer had learned was a gesture of respect or humility. Skarath turned as Palmer approached. His reptilian features were difficult to read, but his body language spoke volumes. He seemed shaken, almost reverent. "Commander Palmer," Skarath began, his translator device rendering his words in standard English. "I must speak with you about what happened. I must explain something that even most of my own people have forgotten." Palmer sat down and gestured for Skarath to continue. "Please help me understand what I just witnessed." Skarath was quiet for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice carried a weight that Palmer had never heard before. "My people have not always been the Velkari Empire. Long ago, millions of years in our past, we were simple creatures living in communal spawning grounds. Females would lay eggs in protected pools, giving all their energy to create the next generation." Palmer listened carefully, trying to understand where this was going. After laying eggs, the females would often collapse from exhaustion. They would fall beside the pools, completely vulnerable and unable to defend themselves. This was a dangerous time. Predators would come, seeking easy prey. Scarath's eyes became distant as if he could see across the vast expanse of time to those ancient days. But nature provided a defense. The younglings, newly hatched and fresh from their shells, would instinctively form protective circles around any collapsed female. Not just their birth mother, but any female who had fallen. Palmer felt goosebumps rise on his arms. He was beginning to understand. These younglings, barely able to walk, would defend the collapsed females with their lives. They would stand guard until the females recovered or until adult protectors arrived. Many younglings died doing this, but the behavior ensured the survival of our species. Scarath turned back to face Palmer directly. As we evolved intelligence and built civilization, this behavior became unnecessary. Our females no longer collapse after spawning. We have medical technology and safe environments. The instinct faded from our conscious minds. Adult Velkari do not remember this behavior. We do not teach it to our children. But it remains in their genetic memory, Palmer said softly. Yes, buried deep, waiting for the right trigger. Scarath's crest rose slightly. When those younglings saw Commander Morrison collapse after pushing herself beyond her limits, something ancient awakened in them. They saw a parent figure fall after giving everything to her duty. They saw someone who needed protection. Palmer felt a chill run down his spine. They saw her as one of their own. More than that, Commander. In ancient Velkari tradition, the Guardian Circle is considered the holiest act of our species. It represents pure instinctive sacrifice, the protection of those who give everything for others. When adult Velkari witness younglings performing the Guardian Circle, we are bound by the deepest laws of our nature to honor both the fallen and the Guardians. Scarath lowered his body in a gesture of deep respect. Commander Morrison triggered something we thought was lost to history. She showed a depth of dedication that reached across millions of years of evolution and spoke to the oldest part of our species. Palmer sat back in his chair, processing this information. What does this mean for our mission? For human-Velkari relations? It means everything has changed, Scarath said simply. We came here believing humans were weak because they tire easily. We thought your reliance on rest and your physical limitations made you inferior. The war priest's crest rose higher, but we were wrong. Commander Morrison did not collapse because she was weak. She collapsed because she refused to stop until her body forced her to. She fought beyond the point where logic would demand surrender. This is not weakness, Commander. This is the same strength that drove my ancestors to stand guard even when death was certain. Palmer felt a surge of pride for his commanding officer. Kate had been trying to prove human worth to the Velkari, and she had succeeded in a way none of them could have imagined. The younglings will not leave her side until she wakes, Scarath explained. It would be a grave insult to force them away. In our culture, they have claimed her as one worthy of the ancient protection. How long will this last? Palmer asked. Until she wakes and acknowledges them. Then they will know their duty is complete. Scarath paused. Commander, I have sent a message to the Velkari Council. I am recommending a complete overhaul of our alliance with humanity. My people need to learn from yours. Palmer raised his eyebrows in surprise. Learn from us? What could we possibly teach the mighty Velkari Empire? Scarath's expression was solemn. You can teach us what we have forgotten. We have spent so long breeding warriors that we forgot what it means to have guardians. We value strength and endurance, but we have lost sight of sacrifice and dedication. Part 3. Kate woke slowly, her mind foggy and confused. The lights in the medical bay were dimmed and she could hear the steady beep of monitoring equipment. Her mouth was dry, and her muscles ached with the kind of deep soreness that came from pushing too hard for too long. She tried to sit up, but a gentle hand pressed her shoulder back down. Dr. Hayes appeared in her field of vision, smiling with relief. Easy there, Kate. You've been out for about 12 hours. Your body shut down from exhaustion and dehydration. You're lucky it wasn't worse. Kate groaned softly. The memories came flooding back. The training exercise. The Velkari observers. Pushing herself too hard. And then nothing. The drill, she mumbled. Did we finish? What did the Velkari think? Doctor, Hayes exchanged a glance with someone Kate could not see. I think you should let Commander Palmer explain that part. Palmer stepped into view and Kate noticed something strange. He was smiling, really smiling, in a way she had not seen in months. Kate, You're not going to believe what happened after you collapsed. As Palmer explained everything, Kate listened in growing disbelief. The younglings, the protective circle, the ancient instinct, War Priest Skarath's explanation. It all seemed impossible, like something from a dream. You're telling me that 3 alien children are standing guard over me because I worked myself into unconsciousness? Not just standing guard, Palmer said. They're right here. He gestured toward the foot of the bed. Kate shifted and looked down. 3 small Velkari younglings were curled up on cushions that someone had placed there. They were sleeping, their small chests rising and falling with each breath. Their scales were pale green and soft-looking, nothing like the hard, dark scales of the adult Velkari. The smallest one stirred as if sensing Kate's attention. It opened one eye and looked directly at her. Then it made a soft chirping sound, almost like a bird. The sound was gentle and reassuring. Kate felt tears prick her eyes. She did not fully understand what had happened, but she could feel the significance of it. These small creatures had protected her when she was vulnerable. They had stood guard over a member of another species because something ancient inside them recognized the need. They refused to leave, Palmer continued quietly. War Priest Skarath said it would be a grave insult to force them away before you woke up and acknowledged them. Kate looked at the sleeping younglings with new understanding. What do I need to do? Just let them know you're okay. Let them know their duty is complete. Kate slowly sat up, ignoring the protest from her sore muscles. The movement woke the other 2 younglings. All 3 of them sat up on their cushions, looking at her with bright, intelligent eyes. Kate was not sure what to say or do. She settled for a simple gesture, placing her hand over her heart and bowing her head slightly. It was a universal sign of gratitude and respect. The 3 younglings chirped in response, a melodic sound that filled the medical bay with unexpected warmth. Then, one by one, they hopped down from their cushions and approached the bed. The smallest one reached out a tiny clawed hand toward Kate. She extended her own hand slowly, and the youngling placed its hand in hers. The scales were surprisingly soft, like warm silk. The youngling squeezed gently and Kate squeezed back. Then it released her hand and stepped back, its small crest rising and falling in what looked like satisfaction. The other 2 younglings repeated the gesture, each one briefly holding Kate's hand before stepping back. Then, as if following some invisible signal, all 3 turned and walked toward the door where several adult Velkari were waiting. War Priest Skarath stepped into the medical bay. His crest was lowered respectfully, and his movements were slow and deliberate. Commander Morrison, he said, his translator rendering his words with unusual gentleness. You have been honored by the ancient Guardian Circle. My people owe you an apology and our deepest respect. Kate was still processing everything, but she managed to nod. I was just doing my job. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. Trouble? Skarath's crest rose slightly. Commander, you have given my people a gift we did not know we needed. You reminded us of something we had forgotten. Over the next few days, Kate recovered her strength while the relationship between humans and Velkari transformed completely. The story of what happened spread through both communities, and the reactions were profound. The Velkari Council sent official representatives to the UES Horizon. They brought gifts and formal apologies for their previous dismissive behavior toward humans. They requested detailed information about human training methods, leadership styles, and the cultural values that drove humans to push themselves beyond physical limits. War Priest Skarath became a constant presence on the ship, spending hours in conversation with Kate, Palmer, and other human officers. He wanted to understand everything about human nature, particularly the tendency to sacrifice personal well-being for the good of the group. We Velkari have become too focused on individual strength, he explained during one conversation. We measure worth by how long one can fight, how much one can endure. But we have forgotten that true strength sometimes means knowing when to rely on others and being willing to fall so that others can rise. The 3 younglings became celebrities of a sort. They were named Kresh, Sarla, and Tivix, and they spent much of their time with the human crew. They learned English with remarkable speed and asked endless questions about Earth, human families, and why humans cared so much about people who were not related to them by blood. Kate found herself particularly drawn to the smallest one, Tivix. The little Velkari followed her everywhere, watching her work and asking thoughtful questions. "Why did you keep going when your body wanted to stop?" Tivix asked one day. Kate thought about the question carefully. "Because my team needed me to. Because I wanted to show your people that humans are strong in our own way. Because sometimes the job is more important than how I feel." Tivix's small crest bobbed up and down. "My instinct told me to protect you. I did not think about it. I just knew I had to stand guard." "That's the same for me," Kate said. "I didn't think about pushing myself too hard. I just knew I had to keep going." The youngling looked at her with wise eyes. "We are not so different, you and I." Kate smiled. "No, I suppose we're not." The cultural exchange program expanded rapidly. Velkari younglings were brought to the ship to interact with human crew members, learning about concepts like teamwork, emotional support, and self-sacrifice for others. In return, humans learned about Velkari history, their ancient traditions, and the complex social structures that governed their society. War priest Skarath organized a ceremony to formally honor Kate and recognize the awakening of the guardian instinct. The entire Velkari delegation attended, along with most of the human crew. During the ceremony, Skarath presented Kate with a small crystal carved in the shape of a guardian circle, 3 figures protecting a 4th. "This is a symbol from our ancient past," he explained. "It has not been given to anyone outside our species in recorded history. You have earned it, Guardian Mother." The title, Guardian Mother, became Kate's official designation in Velkari records. It carried enormous weight in their culture, marking her as someone worthy of the highest respect and protection. Part 4. The news of what happened on the UES horizon spread across the Galactic Council like wildfire. Species from dozens of worlds heard the story of the human officer who collapsed from exhaustion, and the alien children who stood guard over her. The reactions were varied and intense. Some species saw it as proof that humans were weak and needed protection from children. Others recognized it for what it truly was, a demonstration of dedication and sacrifice that transcended species boundaries. The Velkari, for their part, became passionate advocates for humanity. War priest Skarath was invited to speak before the full Galactic Council. Kate and Commander Palmer attended as observers, sitting in the human delegation area. The council chamber was massive, with seats arranged in circles that rose up like an amphitheater. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the space. Skarath stood at the central podium, his red crest raised high. His voice carried through the chamber with commanding presence. "Fellow council members, I stand before you to speak about humans and the misconceptions many of us hold about their species." There were murmurs throughout the chamber. The Velkari were known for their harsh judgments of other species. Hearing their war priests speak positively about anyone was unusual. We Velkari believed humans were weak. They tire easily. They require frequent rest. Their bodies are fragile compared to many of ours. These facts are undeniable. Skarath paused, letting his words sink in. But we were measuring the wrong things. He gestured toward the human delegation. Commander Kate Morrison pushed herself for more than 23 hours without rest. She drove her body beyond its limits, not for personal glory, but to prove to my people that humans could stand alongside us. When her body finally gave out, she collapsed in complete exhaustion. Some of the alien representatives made sounds of derision. This was exactly the weakness they expected from humans. But here is what we Velkari did not understand, Skarath continued, his voice rising. She collapsed because she refused to stop. Her mind and will were still strong, but her body could no longer obey. This is not weakness. This is a different kind of strength. This is the strength to fight beyond reason, beyond logic, beyond self-preservation. The chamber grew quieter as the representatives listened more carefully. When Commander Morrison fell, something remarkable happened. 3 of our younglings, acting on an instinct buried in our genetic memory for millions of years, formed a protective circle around her. They recognized what she had done. They saw someone who had given everything for her duty, and their ancient nature demanded they protect her. Skarath's crest lowered in a gesture of deep respect. This behavior is sacred to my people. It represents the purest form of sacrifice and protection. These younglings had never been taught this behavior. No living Velkari had seen it in countless generations. Yet when they witnessed a human push herself to collapse for the good of others, something ancient awakened. He turned to face Kate directly. Commander Morrison did not know about our guardian traditions. She was simply being human. And in being human, she touched something profound in my species. The war priest addressed the council again. How many of us can say we push ourselves beyond our physical limits? How many of us sacrifice our own well-being for our teams, our missions, our chosen families? Humans do this regularly. They call it duty. They call it loyalty. They call it being a good leader. A representative from the Quarian Collective, a species of crystalline beings, spoke up. War Priest Skarath, are you suggesting we should all work ourselves to exhaustion? That hardly seems like a virtue. No, Skarath replied firmly. I am saying we should recognize the mindset that allows it. Humans understand something many of us have forgotten or never learned. They understand that their individual well-being is sometimes less important than the well-being of their group. They are willing to fall if it means their team, their ship, their species can rise. Another representative, this one from the Helion Empire, spoke. The Helions have always valued individual excellence. We believe the strongest individuals create the strongest society. And you have created a society of warriors who fight alone, Skarath countered. Humans have created a society of warriors who fight together. When one falls, others guard them until they can stand again. This is why they survive. This is why they thrive. Kate felt uncomfortable being the center of so much attention. She had just been doing her job, pushing herself the way any good officer would. But as she listened to Skarath speak, she began to understand what he was really saying. It was not just about her. It was about what humans represented, a species that had clawed its way up from a dangerous world, learning to rely on each other for survival, a species that valued the group over the individual, that protected the fallen, that refused to leave anyone behind. After the council session, Kate was approached by dozens of representatives from different species. Some wanted to know more about human culture. Others wanted to establish training programs similar to what the Velkari had requested. A few simply wanted to meet the human who had awakened an ancient instinct in another species. A representative from the Zephyrite Concordat, a bird-like species with brilliant plumage, spoke with Kate for nearly an hour. We Zephyrites are taught from hatching to value our individual flight above all else. We are a species of soloists. But watching the recording of those younglings protecting you, I felt something I have never felt before. What was that? Kate asked. Envy, the Zephyrite said softly. Envy that humans have each other in a way my people do not. We fly alone and we are proud of it. But when we fall alone. No one stands guard. Kate did not know what to say to that. She had never really thought about how lucky humans were to have each other, to have that instinct to protect and be protected. Over the following weeks, the UES horizon became a hub of galactic activity. Ships from various species arrived to observe human training methods and learn about human social structures. The Velkari sent more younglings to interact with the human crew, and each interaction brought new understanding. Kresh, Sarla, and Tivix became unofficial ambassadors. They spent their days moving between the human crew and the various alien visitors, explaining what they had experienced and felt when they formed the Guardian Circle. Tivix, the smallest of the three, was particularly eloquent despite being so young. When I saw the Guardian Mother fall, I did not think. My body moved before my mind could understand why. I had to protect her. She had given everything, and that meant she deserved everything in return. The concept resonated with many species, even those who had no similar instinct in their own biology. The idea of protecting those who sacrifice themselves for others was universal enough to cross species boundaries. Kate found herself giving talks and presentations about human leadership philosophy. She spoke about the importance of leading from the front, of never asking your team to do something you would not do yourself, of pushing yourself harder than you push others. It's not about working yourself to death, she explained to a group of mixed species. It's about showing your team that you're willing to give everything. When they see you push yourself to the limit, they trust you more. They know you won't waste their efforts or their sacrifice. Part 5. 6 months after the incident. The relationship between humans and the Valkyrie had evolved into something neither species had anticipated. What started as a simple training exercise had blossomed into a deep cultural exchange that was changing both societies. The Valkyrie Empire officially designated humans as honored partners, a title that carried significant weight in their hierarchical society. It placed humans on equal standing with their oldest and most respected allies. War Priest Skarath was promoted to Ambassador Skarath, tasked with maintaining and strengthening the bond between the two species. Kate received a promotion as well, becoming Captain Morrison and taking command of a new joint human-Valkyrie vessel called the Unity. The ship was designed to be crewed by both species, with accommodations and systems that worked for both warm-blooded and cold-blooded crew members. Commander Palmer became her second in command, and together they built a crew that truly represented what the two species could accomplish together. Half the crew was human, half Valkyrie, and they worked together with a cohesion that surprised everyone. The three younglings, Kresh, Sarla, and Tyvix, grew rapidly over those 6 months. They were now adolescents by Valkyrie standards, their scales hardening and darkening to deeper shades of green. But they maintained their close connection to Kate and the human crew. Tyvix in particular had become almost inseparable from Kate. The young Valkyrie had decided to pursue a career in the fleet, with the goal of eventually serving as a liaison officer just like Kate had been. "You showed me that strength comes in many forms," Tyvix told Kate one day as they walked through the corridors of the Unity. "I want to help others understand that too." Kate smiled at the young Valkyrie. "You already do, Tyvix. Every day you're here, you're teaching both species how to work together." The Unity's first mission was to patrol a disputed border region, where tensions had been rising between two minor species. It was a test of the new partnership, a chance to show the galaxy that humans and Valkyrie could function as a unified force. The mission went smoothly at first. The Unity's presence alone was enough to calm tensions in the region. But on the third week of patrol, they received a distress signal from a civilian transport that had suffered engine failure near an asteroid field. Kate ordered the Unity to respond immediately. The transport was carrying refugees from a war-torn world, including many children. The situation was dangerous because the transport was drifting toward the asteroid field with no power for navigation. The rescue operation required precision and teamwork. The Unity had to navigate through the asteroids to reach the transport, then somehow transfer nearly 200 refugees across to safety while avoiding collision. Kate stood on the bridge, coordinating the effort. Her human crew handled the navigation, while the Valkyrie crew managed the power systems and shields. The two groups worked together seamlessly, communicating clearly and trusting each other completely. Palmer piloted the Unity with expert skill, threading the massive ship through gaps between asteroids that seemed impossibly narrow. The Valkyrie shield operators kept the defensive barriers strong, deflecting small debris that came too close. When they reached the transport, the real challenge began. The refugees were frightened and disorganized. Many were injured. Getting them across to the Unity required patience and calm authority. Kate led the rescue teams personally, moving between the two ships in a spacesuit. She coordinated the evacuation while her crew worked to stabilize the transport's power systems enough to keep life support running. It was exhausting work, both physically and mentally. Kate pushed herself hard, just as she always did, making sure every single refugee was safely aboard the Unity before she would consider the mission complete. 12 hours into the rescue operation, Kate felt the familiar signs of exhaustion creeping in. Her vision was starting to blur, and her hands were shaking inside her spacesuit gloves. She had been working non-stop, refusing to take breaks while there were still people to rescue. Palmer noticed and tried to get her to rest, but Kate refused. There were only 20 more refugees to evacuate, and she wanted to see it through personally. As the last refugee stepped aboard the Unity, Kate finally allowed herself to relax. The mission was complete. Everyone was safe. She had done her job. She made her way back to the bridge, intending to oversee the journey to the nearest station. But as soon as she stepped through the door, her legs gave out. She had pushed herself too far again. This time, though, she did not hit the floor. Strong, scaled hands caught her before she could fall. Tyvix was there along with Kresh and Sarla. The three young Velkari had been watching her throughout the rescue operation, recognizing the signs of exhaustion. They guided Kate to her command chair and helped her sit down. They did not form a protective circle this time. There was no need. They were on a safe ship surrounded by crew who would protect their captain. Instead, they simply stayed close, making sure she was comfortable and cared for. It was a different kind of protection, born from friendship and respect rather than ancient instinct. Palmer called for the medical officer, but Kate waved him off. "I'm fine. Just tired. We need to get these refugees to safety." "The crew can handle it," Palmer said firmly. "You've done enough, Captain." Kate wanted to argue, but she was too exhausted. She nodded and closed her eyes for just a moment. When she opened them again, she was in her quarters. Someone had carried her there and put her to bed. On the floor beside her bed, three young Velkari were sleeping on cushions just like they had done 6 months ago. Kate smiled. Some things never changed. The Unity delivered the refugees safely to a station where they could receive proper care and start rebuilding their lives. The successful rescue operation was reported throughout the Galactic Council, and it became another example of what humans and Velkari could accomplish together. Captain Morrison was commended for her leadership. Though she insisted the credit belonged to her entire crew, the refugees themselves requested a meeting with Kate, wanting to thank the human who had personally overseen their rescue. Among the refugees was a young girl, maybe 8 years old by human standards. She approached Kate shyly, holding something in her hands. "My mom told me to give this to you," the girl said quietly. "She said you didn't stop until everyone was safe. She said that's what real heroes do." The girl handed Kate a small carved figure. It was crude and simple, made from wood, but it depicted a person standing with arms outstretched, protecting others. Kate felt tears prick her eyes. She knelt down to the girl's level. "Thank you. This means more to me than you know." The girl hugged her, and Kate hugged back. When she stood up, she noticed that every Velkari on the bridge had lowered their crests in respect, including Ambassador Scareth, who had come aboard to observe the mission. "You did it again," Scareth said with what might have been amusement in his voice. "You pushed yourself until you collapsed. Do you make a habit of this, Captain?" Kate laughed tiredly. "Only when it matters. Everything matters to you humans," Scareth observed. "That is both your greatest strength and your greatest weakness." "Maybe," Kate agreed, "but I wouldn't change it." Over the following years, the Unity became famous throughout the galaxy. The ship and its crew were requested for difficult missions that required both strength and compassion, force and diplomacy. Captain Morrison's leadership style became a model for others to follow. The story of the Guardian Circle was taught in academies across multiple worlds. It became a symbol of what could happen when different species truly understood and respected each other. The incident had shown that sometimes the most profound connections happen not through careful diplomacy, but through simple acts of dedication and sacrifice. Kresh, Sarla, and Tyvix all went on to distinguished careers in the fleet. They never forgot that day when their ancient instinct had awakened, and they spent their lives working to bridge the gap between species and cultures. Tyvix eventually became Captain Tyvix, commanding a vessel of their own. When asked about their greatest influence, they always mentioned Captain Kate Morrison. "She taught me that strength is not about never falling down," Tyvix would say. "It's about giving everything you have and trusting that others will stand guard until you can rise again." Kate continued to serve in the fleet for many years, earning respect from dozens of species. She never stopped pushing herself, never stopped putting her crew and her mission first, and she collapsed from exhaustion several more times over her career. But she was never alone when she fell. There were always others ready to stand guard, to protect her until she recovered. Sometimes they were human, sometimes they were Velkari, sometimes they were species she had never met before. It did not matter. The lesson had spread across the galaxy. When someone gives everything for others, when someone pushes themselves past their limits for a greater good, they deserve protection. They deserve to be guarded until they can stand again. That was the human way. And thanks to 3 small Velkari younglings who acted on an ancient instinct, it had become the galactic way too. Years later, when Kate finally retired, she returned to Earth. She brought with her the small crystal that War Priest Scareth had given her, carved in the shape of the Guardian Circle. She also brought the wooden figure that the refugee girl had given her,